Hi, everyone. My name is Ben Wright, Human Cartoonist Extraordinaire. I am the Community Outreach Manager for the Columbus Cartoon Coalition, and I'm here with a collection of very talented people. Why don't we start introducing ourselves, starting over there?
I'm assuming you're pointing at me.
Yep.
Hello, I'm Kelsey D. Crawford. They, them, if you please. I am the festival and convention lead for the Columbus Cartoon Coalition. I also make tons of web comics, and at the same time that I've been making web comics, I've been making zines and mini comics since 2014.
Yep. And going directly down to James.
Hey everybody, James Easterly here, indie cartoonist and every once in a while assistant creative director at Comics Wellspring.
And last but not least, hold on, there we go.
There you go.
Wait, yeah.
Yep, there we go.
What's up, guys? I'm Robbie Melendez, aka Raw. Just a dude who makes things.
We are doing this as part of C3's Anthology adventure. We currently have an anthology up on Crowdfunder. There is a link for it that Kelsey is pointing to. QR code. I'll bring up the link. We just hit our $200 milestone a couple days ago, which triggered a live stream, specifically on the topic of how to make and print a mini comic.
Which is what you're watching. This is the thing that you are watching.
Exactly. We do have more of these potentially in the pipeline. Next one is going to be at the $400 mark. So please consider donating if you have not done so yet. There's a bunch of cool things you can get: anthology stickers, holographic stickers, which we just added thanks to Raw. That's pretty great. And yeah, it should be a pretty awesome time. Links are also in the description down below.
Well, oh, look at those holographic stickers.
Making you big. There we go.
So shiny, so glittery.
They look great. Designed by Danielle Dean. So what we're going to be talking about today are mini comics. A lot of people in the indie comic scene make mini comics, but there are so many different kinds and so many different ways to set it up that we thought it'd be a good idea to talk about the various types, what mini comics are in case you don't know, and how they are set up and printed or hand drawn or however you end up doing it. I have been doing mini comics since basically 2014. Most of my assignments when I was at comic school were basically mini comics. Mm-hmm. And huge portion of what I produce falls into this category. So the basic definition of a mini comic, I've seen a number of different things, but it's usually sort of a catch-all for any self-published indie comics that are smaller than a typical or a classic floppy issue of a comic. Seems to be sort of the most classic version of it. It could be shorter. It could be physically smaller, and it can be all kinds of different shapes and sizes. Is that a fair description to people? Did I get that right?
Yeah, nailed it.
I would say so.
Cool.
They come in all shapes and sizes. They can be black and white or color. Most often they are in black and white.
Yeah.
And they can be about any particular topic. You don't necessarily have to censor yourself.
Yeah, a lot of this of mini comics came out of the underground comics movement when things like Xerox machines started becoming more popular, where people could literally just go in with some sheets of paper, put it through a copy machine, fold everything up, and sell it. Mm-hmm. And it's tied into the zine movement. Technically, a mini comic is a type of zine. And it's just one of the ways for indie creators to get stuff out there.
If you don't mind, let me bring up a visual cue for anyone unfamiliar with, say, the terminology of floppies and comics of sorts. So sure. I like doing visual guides. So first, let's start off with the floppy, and I'm going to choose my issue of Nausicaa here because the idea of a floppy is that it literally flops around.
Yeah.
And then a smaller version of a comic is what's called an ash can. Now, this can debatably be considered a mini comic, I would say. But then if you want to go even smaller, and this is where we'll show this off later, my mini comic. So the various ranges of size there.
Is that a sixth letter?
Come again?
Is that a sixth of a letter size sheet of paper?
I want to say this is a fourth.
Oh, it is a fourth. Okay.
Yeah.
And we'll get into the particulars of that as we go on.
That's right.
Also, to answer a question from the Los, no, we do not need a shrink ray this time. We do not need a shrink ray this time. Maybe next time. That might be the next stream.
So going extremely basic, I think sort of one of the first things I wanted to bring up is a version of a mini comic that is classically known as the accordion comic. It is one of the easiest forms of mini comic to make. It is very tiny. Mm-hmm. And what's neat about these is that they are just one single sheet of paper.
That's called the accordion?
That's what I've heard it called. I don't know if there's an official name for it, but I've heard this called an accordion fold because basically it folds up kind of like an accordion.
Okay, I will be right back. I should have had this prepared before we started live, but this is the thing. I'll be right back.
Yep. This is an extremely good method if you're trying to keep things absolutely simple, absolutely minimum. The one part that gets confusing is where the pages end up, which is why I decided to make a dummy that just has numbers on it. Let me get big. C3 actually has one of these that we give away basically as a business card with our contact information and how to draw a comics thing built on it. But if you're going extremely simple, extremely basic, anyone can make one of these incredibly easily. And all you need is a printer that can print one side because we don't even use the back side of it. Oh, and you need
scissors. You can just Google zine template and you'll find a million if you can't remember the order and what goes where, and you just drag that into your file and turn it off.
I have seen some artists experiment with double-sided versions of that, but where the comic is on one side, but then you open it up and you flip it over, and the other side is something like a map or a full-on illustration or something else, which is really cool.
I just realized I was going to have paper handy so I could do demos of this, and I left it on the other side of the room.
That's okay. I was trying to find, I had a copy of What You Mean, What's a Zine for years, and I forgot that I had to rehome it when I moved to the Toledo area, unfortunately. But it had a lot of different zine formats. Like it had that basic mini comic template. It had another mini comic format that was also called the accordion, where it actually was accordion shaped, and it necessitated taking glue and gluing two sections of paper together so that you could like accordion crunch it up and down.
Maybe I have the wrong name then. Maybe that's what I was thinking of.
I had seen those. I saw somebody do business cards like that where it was like in a little slip case and you pulled it out and it was this accordion thing with a bunch of information.
One of the other things with these that I will bring up, it's as long as you know the basic rules of how they work, it's pretty easy to figure out how to put these together. I actually had to fold a bunch of the C3 ones without having actually, like I'd heard of these comics, but I never actually made one or folded one or done any of that stuff. And it took me maybe a couple minutes to figure out from the printed template. So this is extremely straightforward. One of the other things that I will bring up, you don't have to specifically use the numbers that I use as the example, because theoretically, your starting point could be almost anywhere. I went with what looked cleanest when I actually folded it. But basically, I made this dummy, figured out what looked like the best, went through and numbered it, and that's how I made my own template. So if you forget where the pages would normally go, just do that yourself, and it'll be pretty quick to do. And I'm going to show you how to do it yourself.
Are we going to angle the camera so that we can see this demonstration?
I'm going to attempt.
Okay.
Solo layout. So, blank sheet of paper. I'm going to start with a couple of folds. Fold in half.
Hot dog wise.
Fold in half again.
Hamburger wise.
That's right. I don't know if it actually matters hot dog or hamburger at this stage, but we'll find out. Then finally, you fold it one more time so you have it at the actual page size. And now here's where stuff gets nuts. You've got the seam on top. This is stopping the comic from being able to do what it needs to do. So you're going to take scissors. You're going to trim off the very top of that, just up to the bend right there. So you'll lose a little bit of that page, but what's going to happen? I've also done it with a knife, just up through, but decided that was too violent. Now, you've got the basic setup. You've got the cut in the middle, which is going to allow it to do more stuff. The one thing you need to do now is actually refold it the other way so that now it can open up. Yep. Caught like this. And as soon as it's able to do that, you just open it up like that, close it, and you've got a comic.
That is decidedly not how I do mine.
Then please show me. This is how I figured it out.
All right, hold on. Let me grab
a way to do it. Let me bring you up.
That's the way I know. So I'm excited for.
All right, so let me get a sheet of paper here. So we're gonna do somewhat similar here. We're going to first take our sheet, and I'm going to actually put little purple X's on one side so that you can see. So purple X's on each corner.
Okay.
That way you can see. Okay, so we're going to fold hot dog wise and keep our X's facing out, because the X's are the active designs that we are working with right now.
Gotcha.
Fold it in half like so. And then you unfold it and then fold it hamburger-wise. Like so, with the designs facing outward again. Like that. And then here's where the magic starts. You take one side and you fold it up to this edge, to the center edge here, so that it looks kind of like this. And then you do the same on the other side. Again, designs facing out. Fold the design in on itself.
Gotcha.
And then get that done. And then here's where the magic really happens. You take a pair of scissors and look in. You can, my lighting is not the greatest, but there is a faint midline. If you can see it, right there in the middle. We are going to take our scissors and we are going to cut right down the middle there. Boop. And then you don't lose any of the design. It automatically looks like a little pinwheel design, and boom.
Whoa.
That is way cleaner than the way I do it.
I have been doing workshops for the Girl Scouts for like 2 years doing this stuff.
That's why we have you on here. But yeah, one of the other benefits of that version is, so one of the things I specifically did when I did mine, the numbering I set up wasn't entirely in order, which I could see being confusing. Let me show what I mean.
Okay.
But I kind of had, so 1 and 8 are sort of the front and back cover of this. So I had them sort of separate up top. And other than that, it goes in order. So it goes from 1 to 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way across. Part of the reason I did this is because the way I do this cut that takes off a chunk, I thought that the 1 would actually be the cleanest front cover, because it's not actually, it doesn't have a chunk missing, and it would be larger than a lot of the interior pages. Your method doesn't take out that chunk. So it honestly probably would make things a lot easier, and you'd be able to just have like 1, 2, 3, 4 on one side and then 5, 6, 7, 8 on the other side. So better than the way I do it is what I'm saying.
I mean, you can do either way. It just depends on how you want to lay out the page and how much you want to trim out of that center part. Because there can be some layouts where you can take out more of that center part and use it as like, I don't know, a little insert or something. Oh, we temporarily lost Raw. Oh no.
I'll check in with him, see what's up.
Okay.
In the meantime, maybe I can show off my micro mini.
Ooh, yes. Let's talk about micro minis for a minute.
All right. So that same format, but as opposed to using your 11 by 8 by 8.5 by 11, what I ended up using was an index card because I just wanted to kind of demo the idea for myself, and then I thought this actually would be a fun format. So again, visual cue here. Standard floppy, my mini comic, my micro.
Oh my gosh, look at that little itty bitty baby.
And let me go ahead and fold this open. And I got that same cut. So what I end up doing is I fold it out that way, pinch it together, and voila.
I agree with the Los gasps in comics. I love it.
So that's my thumb size micro comic.
Oh my goodness. That's like perfect for like a Barbie doll.
Or maybe a zine, I should say. This is more zine because it's instructional than it is comic. But at some point I'll make this a comic. Oh, and he's back.
Yay!
Just for the sake of my brain. There we go. That's one of the things that's fun about minis is that they can be any size, any shape, and you're limited only by your creativity and materials. And it takes almost no materials for most of them. Just because Robbie missed it, can you show your micro?
Yes, one more time.
Show the micro mini.
Yeah, right.
It's amazing.
We start with the floppy. We go to the mini. And then we go to the micro.
It's so baby. I love it.
It's so baby.
Yep. And then what I did with this so I could understand the layout.
Yeah.
Nice.
And then fold, bring it together.
See, I don't mess with all that folding. I don't like it. I'm not a good folder. I get very grumpy if my folds aren't perfect and pristine. So I just long arm staple 2 pieces of paper together.
Yeah.
And do little like half page guys. Yep. And got the cutter. My wheel.
Yeah, I highly recommend. Some cutters come with a scoring tool.
Mine is pretty jank. I beat it up over the weekend on holographic covers. Don't recommend. I'm gonna have to get
One of the funny things for me is I don't actually I keep thinking about getting one. I don't actually own a cutter because the vast majority of minis I'm making, I'm ordering enough that I'm having them cut it for me, just because I don't want to do that as much. But we'll get into setting all that up and that kind of thing later. Having a cutter in general, real good thing to have. I do like the Los's comment of slap that behind a sticker for a surprise item. That seems like, with the stickers you just made, Robbie, that actually would be perfect.
Oh yeah,
honestly,
little baby ones.
Yeah, little micro minis would be great as a little like tuck inside item, or like a little like a hidden pocket you can put inside of another zine.
Yeah,
all kinds of things.
Yeah. I don't unfortunately have the sample in front of me. I wasn't able to find it, but a friend sent me a brilliant fold-out version of Mini, where it starts with one panel, and then you open it up, and that's panel 2, and it's larger. And you open that up, and that's panel 3, and it's larger, and it just keeps getting bigger until it's both sides of a sheet of paper.
That's really cool.
It's so cool. My friend Angela Boyle actually sent me that at one point. So look up her stuff. Does some great things. Another type of mini you can do. Getting to what Robbie brought up, the next option for a lot of mini comics.
Sorry.
Get jiggy with it.
Is basically making up an actual floppy that you have to staple and things like that. That's the majority of my comics. The one thing that sometimes gets tricky with that is people figuring out page order. That that has a habit of confusing a lot of people, because you think of it as being 1, then 2, then 3, and all that. And when in reality, each sheet is 1 and 8, 2 and 7, 6 and 3, 4 and 5. I mostly used 8-page samples for this just because that was easy. But so I've seen a couple ways that people deal with this. The one that I find most fascinating, I've actually seen people just number the pages and jump around on a sheet. I don't know how they can keep it straight in their heads. I mess it up every time when I try to do that. So they'll print out a sheet basically like this.
Okay.
Actually fill out comics where the appropriate numbers show up, and then just cut it in half. And that's basically what I showed you here. But if you happen to have access to the Adobe suite, there's a way to do this way easier. It's still a little bit of a pain in the ass, but it is a more manageable pain in the ass.
Okay. I'll have to take your word on that because it has been a while since I worked with the InDesign or Creative Suite. I primarily work with Affinity Publisher, which does not do that automatically.
Yeah. And it's funny because while we're talking about bookletting or imposition, for some reason, a lot of print software does not do it. It's one of those things where I don't know the exact reason for it, but I know when I was at comic school, they tried to find an alternative to Adobe InDesign, which does have this feature built into it. And the only options they were finding for studios would have cost thousands of dollars for this one feature. So I hope Affinity has a version of it, because Affinity Publisher I've heard mostly good things about, but InDesign definitely does, and I can actually show that.
Okay. Are you doing a screen share, or is this just we're discussing this now to get the options on the table?
I was setting up a screen share. Takes a second because Adobe is also...
It's kind of a beast.
It is kind of a beast. I'm also not going to be able to look at my camera, so let me know if it's not showing everything correctly. That's going to be one of the big things. So what we have right now, I've put together a 16-page thing just because it's a little easier with more pages to see why this would be useful. And what I'm doing is I'm going down to print booklet. I'm going to jump through what you have to do to make it work. I'll tell you now, there is some finagling involved, and I apologize for that. But basically what it's going to do is figure out the exact page order for you and put together a file for that. Now, this is technically a print window, so it's expecting you to be going through a printer. I'm going through Adobe PDF, which will turn it into a PDF. I know with some, I've heard with Macs, you might have to create a PostScript file and run that through another Adobe program. I don't know if that's still the case, but that was a problem for a while. But basically, if anything ends up being wrong, it'll tell you, and it'll show you what needs to be fixed. I'll do a quick example. I'm going to change one thing, and it didn't break it. Hold on. How do I ruin you? Okay, here's what I'll do. I'll make it 150% size.
This is great content. Let's see if we can deliberately jank a file in InDesign.
So it'll give you warnings. It'll tell you what's wrong. In this case, I made it 200% the size of the page that it has set in there for default.
Okay.
In fact, hold on. Let me go ahead and set this to default so you see me jump through all the different crazy hoops. So in this case, I believe, which file did I grab? This is the one that I think is actually half letter. So, yep, no, that's wrong. Like I said, I'm deliberately breaking it.
This is great content.
Exciting and new.
And if you would like to back more exciting content and unlock more exciting content, consider backing us on Crowdfunder. Links in the doobly-doo and in the QR code in the corner of the screen.
Links in the doobly-doo, indeed. So I set it to custom. It's going to do the page size correct. I'm telling it to be centered. I don't know why it defaults to upper left. You want it centered. Document bleed settings will sometimes mess you up. I'm not going to go into that too much here. You want to tell it to do all the art instead of subsampling everything. You want to do high resolution. The last tricky thing here, you do want to go to setup. They changed something recently so that this is going to look particularly weird. But you basically want to make sure it's using the correct settings for your Adobe PDF. I don't know why that's such tiny text. But I actually have settings based on Ingram Spark, which is a printer I use commonly. That's typically what I use. You just select that, click print, and it'll be ready to go. So yes, this was a lot of hoops to jump through, but as soon as I hit print and it's showing me no errors or anything like that, it'll give me the option to save it. And we should now have a perfectly set up bookleted file. Now, this seems like a lot of steps, but I'm going to tell you right now, printers will be really happy if you give them a file that's already bookleted. It's going to save them a lot of time, headache, and it makes sure that you've already got your stuff formatted correctly. That's why we jump through all these hoops. Let me find StreamYard so I can switch windows.
And I can tell you from experience, when you have your files print ready, anyone in the print shop or print facility is going to love you, absolutely adore you, because there are times when there are individuals who will submit files, but they aren't necessarily print ready. Maybe they're missing elements that are essential, and it's not a fun experience for, say, customer service or the design team at any print shop or print facility to message you back and say, hey, so your files aren't set up right. You're going to have to do this over again.
Yeah. That's one of the things. I always try to have my files ready to go. And as soon as I'm told anything's wrong, I jump on it immediately. Just because we don't want you guys doing all that work. We want it to be right the first time. Because
it also means that if it's right the first time, you get your books faster.
Yeah,
exactly.
And you don't necessarily have a situation like the thing I'm always afraid of, and I know Kelsey, you've dealt with this some, is misprints. And
yes,
you don't want that to happen. You want your file to already be right.
And well, the hilarious thing about the misprints is that sometimes you don't even catch the misprints in the proof stage. Sometimes you don't see the misprints until you see the final art.
Yeah. And when you're buying enough that you're trying to sell it at cons, you're sometimes, even if it's a small zine, you could be spending upwards, maybe even a couple hundred if you're buying a lot. Like for my group Canon Write Productions, we actually made a free comic book day zine. And I think I spent $200 getting all those printed. And if my file had been wrong, that would be my fault. So they wouldn't reimburse me or anything like that if something were seriously wrong. So it's useful to be able to get that stuff in order.
Yeah. And also when if you're choosing a printer and you're not doing it yourself, see if that printer offers physical proofs before you get into your bulk run.
Yeah. Definitely a good thing to have. A lot of printers will say order one copy first and go from there. And it's going to cost you, it may cost you like $50 because you're buying one off of a company that's used to doing bulk or something like that. That's not always the case, but it may be something that happens. Still probably worth it if you're going to be buying a lot. One other thing you can do to cut back on costs, and this I do a lot when I'm doing zine stuff. I'll print all of it through various online sources and things like that. Best value copy is one that I do tend to go with. I haven't tried Comics Wellspring yet, but it sounds like you guys are pretty awesome. That's going to be...
I always go through. You're good. You're very good.
They are actually going to be my printing partners for The Legend of Jamie Roberts Volume 2, which I'm crowdfunding right now.
Yeah.
So that's exciting.
Yeah, and I actually have a project coming up that I'm thinking about using you guys for. So,
and since we just mentioned CWS and crowdfunder, I'd be not doing my due diligence if I didn't also remark that if you do a crowdfunder and you happen to choose Comics Wellspring as your printer, there is the opportunity to get a 15% discount on your total order.
That's why I partnered with y'all.
Yeah, so things to consider.
Definitely something to consider. But I do also want to go a little bit into tricks you can do, because Comics Wellspring, if you're making mini comics through them, you're going to do like the cutting, the stapling, all that yourself, right?
So that is done in shop. So yes.
Yeah. I do want to cover just a few things that can be helpful if you are going extremely indie, extremely budget, and are cutting it yourself and doing things like that. One of the single biggest things you can do to save money when you are doing large printing things like that is doubling up your printing.
How do you mean?
I will show you.
Okay.
I didn't actually print one of these because it kind of requires 11 by 17 and my printer no longer does that. But I will present.
Okay.
That sounds wrong somehow. Anyway, so I just created that booklet where it had everything ordered the way it was going to need to be for that. And after that, I create another InDesign file or whatever program you use. And why is it not presenting? Hold on. Technology, it is the best.
It all depends on how you have it set up through StreamYard, I guess. StreamYard, our streaming platform of choice.
StreamYard. Get StreamYard today.
StreamYard, our logo is a duck.
Yep. Okay, it's being weird. Someone else talk.
StreamYard, our logo is a duck.
Okay. Hey, I got it. That's exactly what we needed. All right, so we're back in here. You can see I have a bunch of untitled documents because I put these together in a hurry. Here we go. So the original file that we put together was 8.5 by 11, a standard letter sheet of paper in the United States. And what I've done here is take the exact file that got generated. This is for an 8-pager I generated earlier. And create an 11 by 17 page that's called tabloid or ledger. It's basically two sheets of letter paper together. And I doubled them up on the sheet. I basically just dropped each page, then copy pasted it and moved it down. And if you find a printer that prints 11 by 17, very often printing a single sheet of that is cheaper than getting twice the letter sheets. So you get these shipped to you as is. They're not folded, they're not stapled or anything like that. And there comes the follow-up trick. You go to a place, if you have a local print shop, they probably have one of these. I've done it at Office Depot or Office Max, and sometimes at UPS stores they will have this. There's a device called a guillotine cutter, which is one of my favorite stupid tools in the print shop. It is
a demonstration of the guillotine cutter. Magic!
Yep. I was actually thinking of the industrial ones, like the huge boxes. These things, what we used to do in print shops was anytime phone books came out, because for some reason we still get phone books. We were excited whenever we got them, though, because it meant we could show them off and show off the industrial paper cutter. You basically put things in this, in theory, super dangerous device, push 2 buttons on the side of it with the guard down and stuff like that, and it will almost instantly cut paper in half. At Office Depot, they typically charge me 25 cents per cut. So you could bring in a stack of 100 of these doubled up, so it's 200 comics, 25 cents, and you all of a sudden have the full stack ready to fold. So it's a great way to double up, save money if you really need to. Or you could have someone else do all the work for you, which is what Comic Wellspring offers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think at that point, especially since I have limited space and not easy access to a car anymore, that I will just take up other printers on the offer and have them cut it for me.
Yeah. And there are so many things that it's one of those things also where, in a sense, you're paying for your time not to be wasted, which is nice.
It's a convenience fee.
Yeah. And pretty much the only time when I will do the other method is when I'm going super cheap. Like I mentioned those free comic book day things. I was giving those floppies away for free. I didn't want to spend any more money than I had to. And the other example, which I realize now I really should have had it. I also have a super tiny mini that's a weird shape. And as a result, it's kind of hard to find people who'd print it. I don't know if Comic Wellspring would. It would be a 6-letter page, so it's like that big. But I see you thinking.
I was going to say the smallest book I've ever seen in the shop was about 3.5 by 4.5 square, imperfect and square bound.
Okay, so that's about quarter. 3.5 by 4.5.
That big.
Yeah.
If I end up making more of my Cospain minis, I might hit you guys up, see if you guys can do it. But
I was gonna say I would go so far as to say if anyone is familiar with what are trick tracks.
Chick tracks, yes.
Yeah.
So context aside, they're like mini comics about yay big, like 2 inches by 3 or 4 inches.
They are 8th letter, I believe.
Yeah. So that would even be something that is within the capacity of the shop to do, and that would be listed under custom size.
Gotcha. So there's now an option for that. I may take you up if I do reprints of my Cospain stuff. I originally did them the size of Chick tracks and showed them around to people, and I had people get mad that they were so small that they were unreadable. So I made them slightly bigger.
Though to the effect of talking about doing it yourself, I do want to advocate for anyone doing their own thing and really wanting to have the opportunity to experiment, because I think that's one of the avenues that doing it yourself has over going through a print service. This is where I'll kind of be talking against myself to a certain degree. But it's the idea of your standard copy paper and maybe your neon colored paper that you put together. It's a nice standard to have, and you can typically get that through most print services for the most part. If you ask a print shop, they likely have the capacity to do something of this sort. But what they're likely not going to have the ability to do is you take that same type of paper, or maybe something else, but you use a different style of paper. So this is manila paper that I have here for my interior stock. And you can get as fancy as finding paper with glitter. You can find paper that you've recycled from somewhere else. You can actually, let me pull this one out. This is one of my all-time favorite mini comics that I've ever come across. Or maybe I can call this just like a standard comic. But this is pieced together using aluminum foil, tape, and maybe some kind of, I don't even know, stencil of sorts. But this is by far one of the most creative examples of what you can do when you do it yourself.
I didn't see the name. Who's the artist?
So this is by, let me double check if I can find the name here.
I have a guess, but...
So the title of the series is called Caveman Satan.
This is a great name.
Yeah.
Amazing name. It's so good.
Yeah, right?
I'm trying to find the name of the creator here, but I'd say if you look up Caveman Satan, you should be able to find this. But I also have another one of theirs. So each copy of what they do is kind of unique in its own right. So they had more copies of this, but the red ink on here is unique for this particular booklet. So it's one of those things where I would highly recommend, if you really like the idea of experimentation, don't hesitate to at least try.
Yeah, it's one of the things that's great about this. On that note, Robbie, you've done some cool stuff with holographic paper lately.
Yeah, so I made these little ladies.
Ooh.
Here's the back. On holographic sticker paper. I learned things. I failed at things.
But you tried those things.
Yeah. It feels weird to touch a little. I had a lot of problems. At first, when I first started printing, everything was fine. It was all good. And then after I printed a few, things started going awfully. At one point, like a dum-dum, I did not have my laptop plugged in, and it just died in the middle of printing one. I was getting this problem where on the... So they print out like this way. Yeah. So on the upper left corner on everything, the upper left corner kept getting jammed. And I didn't know why, because I printed a few the day before and it was fine. And then I realized this stuff is very temperature sensitive, and my basement is very cold. And this stuff's like double polybagged the way it comes. It comes in a little like cellophane bag, and then it has another thick vinyl envelope to keep it in. When you take it out, if it sits out too long, the temperature is going to affect it, and when it takes in the ink, it's going to start to curl like a Pringle chip. And then while it's curled, that is when the problems are starting. It took me a while to figure out. So like you only get 20 of these in a pack, and they can, depending on who you're going with, they range from $10 to $20 a pack. Yeah. And I was about half of what I was printing was usable. And the backing on this is also very flimsy. So I did find, I'll show you, I have the brand. It is Yensi sticker paper. And what I like about it is how vibrant the holofoil is itself. It's like super rainbowy and reflective. It catches light really well, and it doesn't dull your print. But I switched to this other stuff, Bleed Rook. So this stuff's a little different. It's not as vibrant, and when it prints, you can see the dots of your print a little more. But what is nice about it is the back of it is way thicker, so it's less prone to that curling warping effect. The other ones, when they were coming out of the printer, sometimes they would come out straight, like above the tray. And what would happen, my tray is kind of at an angle. It would hit the tray and just start like crunching in on itself. Yeah. So I had to like babysit it, but with this stuff, it's way better, and I don't get that problem, which is very nice. The only kind of whack thing is I haven't tried to print on the bottom. I'm too scared to. So my plan is to print other stickers that will have like a little about this comic and hi, I'm me sort of thing. Yeah. And then in the back, I'll do handwritten notes and put a little sticker that people can have and put on there. Whatever. I mean,
another thing you could theoretically do, just if you want to use that for, the Indicia copyright 2023, Robbie. Yeah. All that stuff. You could honestly, and you were worried about that, print some Avery labels and just like pop that on there.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking something like that, and I couldn't think of what they were called. I was like, label, but it's like a certain kind of label. Like I know there's a name.
I mean, you don't have to go with Avery, but that's just the brand I happen to have with me.
Avery is the most common for a reason.
It's true. But yeah, and also I really like the idea of having random stickers on the inside cover of that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm just going to use that double. It's like those little round, clear, jelly sticky things that like for hanging up wall art that doesn't damage anything you take it off of. I printed these. It's not holographic. It's this Epson. No, not this Epson. It's this other Epson. I have an Epson Echo Tank printer.
Okay.
Same. I love it.
Yeah, I love it. And I was using this paper because it's double-sided presentation paper, which is nice. I had bought some other paper that wasn't double-sided. I didn't realize it until it was too late. I'm like, I mean, it's paper. You can print on both sides, right? No, not right. So I was having the same problem with this stuff where I was pulling out how much I wanted to print and just kind of sitting it on my printer. And then it was curling, and every single corner of this, every page, the corners would just get eaten. And it was only when I was printing the second half after ink had already been hit on one side. So one side would print fine, flip it upside down to print the other side, and it would just chew it. So if you're going the home printer route, definitely be mindful of keeping your paper bagged and not exposing it to harsh temperatures like my freezing basement.
The other thing to keep in mind too, I don't know if Epson has this feature. I have an HP printer, and you can change the paper settings. You can change the printer and tell it, hey, I'm printing with this kind of paper now. The options that cycle through on the HP printer that I have include like specialty paper matte, specialty paper glossy, thick plain paper, and a few other different options, as well as photo papers of varying sizes. I don't know if Epson necessarily has that feature, but
it does, and it's the worst. It's the worst thing about the printer. So the paper will say, when printing with this paper, choose, and it will list 3 different types. It's like, choose this. If your printer setting doesn't have it, choose this. If it doesn't have it, choose this. And so I'll pick one on my printer, but then on the software for the printer, totally different list of options. None of the ones mentioned on the paper, none of the ones on my thing. Firmware is updated. What is going on? So I always get like an error.
I had the same thing happen.
That might depend on the firmware that you're using, because I when I print stuff, I just use the HP Print app. It took some finagling because it didn't initially like connecting on my Wi-Fi, but eventually I made it listen. And once I got it to listen, I got it to listen to more to like, hey, I want to print this thing and I want to print it on this type of paper. And it would give me the options that I would want.
Yeah.
So that might be a question for Dr. Google for figuring out how to fix that.
Yeah. I could be wrong. I think the problem is that Epson has its own terminology that it's using, and the software, not for the printer itself, but for whatever app you're using for printing, has different terminology, which is stupid.
I always print through the print manager, the Epson print manager. So I have it set to override anything else because I use a Cricut for like stickers and stuff, and it has an option to print through the Epson thing instead of Cricut.
I need to look into that because it drives me crazy when I have the exact same problem you described.
I hate it.
I will say though, like, I don't know which EcoTank you have. I do really enjoy this.
I have the 2803.
2803. I have the 3850. And what's cool about it is this is a good thing to bring up specifically in the context of printing your own zines and stuff like that. A big factor is if you're trying to keep as cheap as possible, home printers are okay with that. Depending on if you have ink cartridges or toner or one of those other options, you need to be paying attention to how much per sheet you're paying because it's weirdly deceptive. Like home printers like, oh, this is going to be the cheapest option. Very often it's not. Like you could be paying way too much per sheet. So far, I've had very little problems with the quality of the EcoTank, which is
the ink lasts for ever. At least for me, I've printed I've run out of black. I've had it for a year, and I'm not even halfway through CMYK colors yet.
Yeah,
I'm not even close to half.
I haven't even had to refill my printer yet, which I'm excited about. I have the refill bottles, and hopefully they don't dry out by the time I get to it. But the refills themselves cost very little, and it does seem like economically. I did the math a while back, and I think I've determined that if I'm using cheap paper, I could do like 4 cents for a black and white copy or something like that. Like, it gets really cheap.
Oh, nice.
So it is something to consider what equipment you have if you're going to be printing samples.
Yeah.
At the very least, printing samples and not something you're going to sell is also an option on these printers. It's good to have something you can test with.
Yeah.
Ordering them can be expensive.
I will say the one thing about home printers is you're not going to be able to get, from the most part, like the full bleed where the paper goes all the way to the edge. So you have a little gap. So I had to set my files up. These were all 11 by 17, and I put a 1/2 inch margin because my printer margin is like a 1/4 of an inch, I think.
Yeah.
So that 1/2 inch, when you shrink it down, goes down to 0.25, and then I just trim it. But this paper sucks with the rolling thing. I'll actually listen to this. This is awful. Ugh, so bad.
It's the worst ASMR stream.
And you subjected all of our viewers to that. Thanks a lot, dude.
You're welcome.
So lesson learned on that. I will not be using that to cut holographic sticker paper.
Yeah, because if you want to draw more viewers, what you want to do is you want to rattle them with really terrible ASMR.
That might be my intro theme song from my YouTube channel when I start it. It'll just be that.
Yeah. That is, you did bring up something that I was debating whether or not to bring up because I'm worried it's too much for a Minicomic tutorial thing. But bleed is an important factor when you're making a lot of comics. If you're doing a very basic Minicomic, it might be something you just don't worry about. If you're getting more complex with it, it is something you worry about. For anyone who doesn't know, bleed refers to when the artwork goes all the way to the edge of the page. Yep. And the vast majority of printers cannot actually print to the edge of the page. There's a working area where they just cannot print. And what most print studios are doing before they send you stuff when you've paid for full bleed is they're actually cutting off the edges to do what's called a face trim, which is also my death metal band name.
Actually, hold on a second. Let me see if I can bring up something really quick. Keep talking.
I wish I had it. My uncle somehow years ago got me a copy of Battle Chasers untrimmed. So it's a lot. It's like a big trim. And it looks like a stamp. It's like wriggly, ridgy around the edges. It's pretty cool looking. I've had that forever. I'll have to take pictures of it.
So the way that we make art go all the way to the edge is there's a bleed area that the art continues into. Basically, most printers I've come across just want like 1/8 of an inch for it. I usually do 1/4 of an inch just to be safe, and then you can shrink it down if you need to. But basically, just keep making the art. It continues past that point. And then when the printers come in, they cut off a little bit of that art, but very tiny, in order to make it bleed all the way to the edge. If you want to do that yourself, you just have to be kind of paying attention to what's your border is going to be so you don't have anything important in that section. And then you can use a paper cutter like several people have shown on the stream. But that is definitely something I highly recommend. If you have something with full bleed, go through a professional printer. They'll do it for you better than you can. It's significantly easier. Another thing, and I didn't bring this up because it gets used so infrequently, but it's kind of related to face trimming, so it's worth mentioning, is creep. It doesn't come up unless you have a very, very long saddle stitch, like staples on the end, classic comic design. But basically, the more sheets you get into there, the pages towards the middle are actually going to get pushed out a little bit just naturally based on the thickness of the paper. So if you are making a particularly long comic that you're stapling that way, there are formulas you can look up online. You can put into the bookletting thing, and it'll actually like basically move your artwork slightly in towards the margin more. So when they do the face trim, it won't disappear. I don't have the formulas in front of me, which is one reason I didn't want to go too much into it. But that is something worth looking up if you're planning on a longer mini comic that you're planning to.
I brought up, and I don't know if I can do a screen share on my end since you're the host, but I did bring up the cover art for The Legend of Jamie Roberts Volume 1 to demonstrate bleed and what that looks like and where printers would trim and that sort of thing.
Can you bring it up again? And I think I might have accidentally closed it.
Let me see if I can share screen here.
Yeah, you should be able to.
Affinity, allow, and cool. I have it, and there it is. So what we're seeing here is the cover of The Legend of Jamie Roberts Volume 1 to give a demonstration of what like live area and bleed and all that looks like. So the actual art is this selected area. And I have it fitted so that the original art is like 7 by 10.5-ish. And it's supposed to print on a page that is standard comic size. And I deliberately sized it this way so that excess could be trimmed off. So I have the excess sitting off of the page edges, which are illustrated here with these purple lines. So like there's the edge of the art, and then there's the purple line right there. That's the paper edge. And then inside of that is what's called the live area. And the live area is that brown box-ish.
And just this was something that we started to introduce in our templates at Comics Wellspring, and something that needs to get updated a little bit here and there. But in between your live area and your bleed area are your margins. And what divides the margin from the bleed is your trim line.
Yeah. One of the things that is you also want to be careful with is you can set bleed area, the trim zone, and things like that. And sometimes printers will screw up and cut in the wrong place. It happens, especially when they're working with a lot of books. I actually had a big problem with this when I was making my second graphic novel, The Legacy of L. The printer managed to do a face trim, I want to say like a full 1/4 inch in instead of an 1/8 inch in, and cut off a bunch of my books' like the page numbers at the bottom. I see James flinching. That he knows what I'm talking about. They did compensate me and send me new books.
Good.
Actually, I have examples. I just realized I have an entire box of non-saleable copies of this.
Thankfully, if you're printing mini comics and stuff at home, you don't necessarily have to worry about this sort of thing. This is only if you are working with outside printers.
So does anybody have any experience? Because I'm afraid to do them because I feel like I'll muck it up. Double splash pages, like going across 2 pages.
Yeah.
I'm so afraid of them. I'm afraid to do one. I'm not afraid to like draw it and put it. I'm afraid to send the files because I feel like that's the part I'm going to do wrong.
James might be able to talk more about the printer side of that, but I can say from the creator side, you just make sure there's nothing that can't get lost in the margin right at the center of it.
Okay.
I can actually show an example because I grabbed one. Here's a double page spread I did from my book.
Yeah.
And you can kind of see like some stuff gets lost in the margin right there, like the edge of the phone gets cut off. And the most important thing is you're not losing any data because it just sort of ended up a little bit misaligned, but nothing critical was right in that center spot.
I was going to say, as long as you're still connected to Wi-Fi with that phone, you should be all right, right?
Yeah. Pretty much, yeah. I also brought this because this is an example of one of the ones that got cut badly. But that's the bottom margin. That looks fine. Top margin, way too close. And I had someone actually cut off the top or bottom of panels.
That's super close.
Yeah. I was pretty unhappy with them. Oh, actually, another fun thing I just spotted randomly flipping through. is they didn't actually keep full bleed on some of the pages. Like you can see that edge right
there. That drives me bonkers anytime that I see that in indie produced books.
It drove me crazy. I'll tell you what, I got a couple cases of this book. I think it was 3 boxes when I got the first print run. And I knew from previous experience with this printer, I'm debating if I want to shame them or not. I will say their initials are IG. I'll say no more. Some of you, no, IS. Sorry.
Yeah, IS.
Yeah, but I went through the one of the boxes entirely, just flipping through quickly to see if there were any print problems. I was specifically looking for trim issues. Didn't see any in the first box. Most of the books in the next 2 boxes had trim issues.
That sucks.
Yeah, it sucks. By comparison, there's another printer I went with for another project, Mixum, which I will name because they were great.
Oh yeah, I use them.
Yeah, I have gone through, done the same check, and I've never had a single misprint. And I've had.
And I will say, for smaller stuff, they're very affordable. After I had made some of my smaller stuff, I looked into them, and what I spent on printer paper, I could have just paid them to do, because it's literally 2 pages. This is the cover, and then another page in the middle is just a 4-page story. Yeah. I could have got it from them for like $15 and got myself like 20 copies, which is what I made, including all the mess ups that I had to throw away, like these weird smudges and chewed up corners.
Yeah,
they're a good option.
Yeah, definitely recommend if you don't go with Comics Wellspring, looking at Mixum. But honestly, like, I've recently got the sample stuff from Comics Wellspring, and
as did I.
I've actually got a comic I'm working on right now that I might be going through you guys for, so we'll be in touch.
I want to quickly jump on the point of 2-page spreads, because I think that's an important thing to discuss. First and foremost, if you are doing a 2-page spread, your best option, if you're going to do that, and granted, it does matter where, if you're dealing with a floppy, you're dealing with staple bound, you want to be mindful where the center of your comic is, because the center fold is going to be your best place to put a spread. Because if you're dealing with, let me see, I don't know if I have my mini comic here is a good example. Let me get one of the complete ones here. Let's see. Yeah. So if you're dealing with 2 pages, and it's clearly not aligned, there's the risk that it's going to be slightly off no matter what. But if you're dealing with the center, if I can find that, and you can see the staples poking through, that's where that's a single sheet. And what I would recommend is, if the printer you're going with has a centerfold option, at least ask.
Yeah.
I would say, ask to see if they have that option available, because sometimes you might be dealing with a printer where that's not the case, and you have to be mindful of where is the center of your book. And that's where you can figure out where you can put that centerfold in, and you're less likely going to deal with anything lost through how the bleed and the trim is set up.
Yeah. And the example I showed also was kind of a weird one, because it was a perfect bound book. Just what I had handy, because I have a lot of stuff there.
But that's also a good thing to bring up for anyone that's going from your mini to a bigger format, or even if you are dealing with a mini and it's square bound. Because I think I have a little mini comic about frogs that I got that's absolutely tiny. It's like maybe 2.5 by 2.5. I run over to grab it, but just be mindful of how you're setting up your files. There's always definitely going to be the risk of things getting lost. But I'd say if you're dealing with a 2-page spread, just be mindful how you're illustrating that and where you're putting your most important information. So that's why I would always recommend, don't put your most valuable information in the center. Have it either on one side or another, and anything that's not too important, doesn't matter if it's near the center.
Yeah.
So. But I did want to. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that's where a page composition and page layout is going to come in real handy whenever you're figuring that stuff out.
Yeah.
Speaking of figuring things out, I wanted to show this off a little bit earlier since I was talking about experimentation, but it kind of slipped my mind, but I want to bring it up real quick.
Okay.
So, standard mini comic, your accordion, or whatever we're going to figure out later on what these are called, et cetera, et cetera. But something else that I started experimenting with just not even a few days ago was the idea of a scroll comic.
Ooh.
That's cool.
It's like a webtoon made real.
I was about to make that joke.
Look at that.
Yeah. So I could roll this out further, but I don't want to. So you can orient it however you like. I'm still working on how to actually make this a thing, but this was kind of my prototype to at least experiment with the idea of, well, maybe I don't want to do a staple bound. Maybe I don't want to do a glue bound. Maybe I want to do something where the format altogether is different and I can create a different experience with my mini comic. And it's kind of what I came up with, because I know Ron Wimberly experimented with doing his own scroll-like comic, and I thought, why not me? And then I could make like a little cup to put on my table at cons to just...
And you can stack it vertically.
It's funny because I'm having a cryptography nerd out moment, because it reminds me of an old school type of cipher. I don't actually know how to pronounce it, but it's like a Cytale.
Okay.
Scytale. And the whole idea is it looks like a random string of letters until you wrap it around a specific sized pole, and then it actually reveals a message. Which I could see being really cool with like a scroll format if you figure out a way to make that happen. I don't know exactly how it would work. I don't know if it would even do anything. Thought I'd throw it out there since you're playing with it.
And I'd also recommend you can probably fuss around with 8.5 by 11. But I would highly recommend, if you really want to get the most mileage for your paper, either 11 by 17 or a great paper that, if you have the option at home to deal with bleeds, look for 12 by 18 or 13 by 19 paper.
Yeah. It's a little tough with home printers, but if you can do it, it's great.
Yes.
It's one of the other things I've experimented with a little bit is getting legal size paper, which for anyone who doesn't know is 8.5 by 14. It first off, folding that in half, kind of nice. You got like 7-inch instead of 5.5-inch, so you get a little bit more space to do stuff. It's a nice little format. And also, if you want to do stuff with bleed, most printers can handle that. So you still don't have issues on the top and the bottom, but on the side, you actually have an extra space you can cut off if you want to do that. So, good thing to think about.
Handy dandy.
Yep. All right, we've already been going over an hour, so I do want to ask if anyone in the chat has questions about zine or mini comic making or anything we've talked about today. Hit us up. Let us know. Otherwise, we're going to keep going. Kelsey's holding up a little comic.
Yes, I wanted to talk about a little variation of the thing that we did 2 different demos of, which was knocking over my tablet pen, taking the 8.5 by 11 sheet, like so, and then just folding it like that. I actually did a variation of this for my little mini comic zine, a little art zine, Boys, a Dragon Ball fanzine, because these were all drawn for Instagram, so they were square format. So I did kind of the same sort of layout as this, but I accounted for, hey, I'm going to be chopping off like the bottom part of those pages, and it actually turned out real nice. So yeah, I did not staple this one. They usually get stapled down the middle, but I did not staple this one for demonstration purposes. But yeah. And you can also just stack one inside of another and get double your fun. So there you go. I'm not sure that I would recommend doing more than one nested inside of another one. I think that might be a little too cumbersome. But I have done I've done one nested in one of quarter size. So 3.5 by 4.5, I want to say, is the dimensions. Like about this size. I've done zines and mini comics about this size. And nested one inside of another. So it was like 3 sheets folded up, stapled together into one booklet. Got a little clunky in places, but it worked.
Robbie's having technical difficulties. He will be back.
Well, we've been going for like an hour and 10 minutes.
True. I want to give people a little time to potentially put in questions if they happen to have any, but
sure,
we may be getting close to a wrap up on this.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things with that we're basically trying to tell everybody is experiment. We've given some of the basics for good practices with mini comics and independent comic design in general, but the sky's the limit with a lot of this stuff. Don't feel like you're hampered by anything in trying to make this. A mini comic should be a place where you can have fun and where you can try out stuff that you might not normally do. I feel bad because Robbie mentioned he wanted to talk about this, but one of the things that it's an interesting experiment for is you got something this tiny or even smaller.
Okay.
Looks like the technical issues have gotten worse. Robbie will not be able to join us, unfortunately. He just sent a message. But he says bye to everybody. Thank you, Robbie, for joining us.
Thank you, Robbie, for joining.
And I feel extra bad now that I'm talking about the thing he wanted to talk about.
Well, this is your window to talk about it. So what is it?
And someone is asking, will this be up after? Meant to catch us, but I missed it. Yes, it will be up. There's also a playlist on the Columbus Cartoon Coalition YouTube page that will have all these videos linked in, including the interviews we did previously. So good thing to check out. But
yes.
Yeah. The point I was bringing up is that writing is a really interesting thing to practice with this stuff because you have a lot less space to work. And if you can condense an idea and make it legible when your pages are tiny or even microscopic, the way James does it with the
with the micro minis.
Yeah.
Actually, this might be a good chance for me to show off my mini comic because so this is an example of one of my printouts that I did. But let me go ahead as I have that up. Show off the actual scaled version of the comic. So this is to scale of how I drew it. And then the printed result. I typically wouldn't recommend this because if you work double up or even 1.5 up from the pages you're dealing with, you're probably going to get better results in terms of the scan. You'll be able to do a little bit more with the sort of illustrative techniques you're putting in. But when you do it 1-to-1, you're kind of getting an idea of what you're in for. Yeah. And then it also forces you to take into consideration when you're lettering things, can someone even read this? Can I even read my own lettering? And then that's also a good chance to practice. Can I do legibility? Can I make this something that even my my mom or my grandma can read with the binoculars that they have for glasses?
Oh, they're famous for being like, trying to read things.
It's one of those things, especially when you're working at a new size, highly recommend doing print tests or anything like that for any text that you're writing in there. The other option is do it by hand, because if you do it by hand on an actual sheet of paper that's at size, you'll know exactly how big you can write it. which is good for a lot of the mini stuff. But if you're using a font or using anything like that, absolutely test print your text, because you don't want it to be. Honestly, my general philosophy is as small as possible, while still being legible to the average person.
Knowing that, it explains a lot about the feedback that you got for your first print test of Cost Paint.
Yeah. I was a little, when I did the original one, part of the reason I made my comic as tiny as I did, I really wish I had a sample nearby. Ooh. Actually, wait, do I? I do not. But
did you, James? Did you do 2 iterations of this? One that was just text and one that was text and art?
So what I do is this is a byproduct of what I've been doing for my current comic book. Is I started with my lettering first, so I had an idea for what my grid was going to be, and then I knew exactly where try to figure out what fingers where my bubbles were, and then from there I could then say, okay, let's zoom in a little bit more here. No, this way. I'll get it. I promise.
Eventually, right. You'll get there.
Let's see. Probably be easier to. Okay. Let me just line this up as best I can. Okay, that's better. So, figuring out. Okay, this is the space where I'm going to put this drawing. So, how do I get that going?
Mm-hmm.
And let me pull up the original page again. So for that one, I use what's called the blue line technique. So as you can see, my lettering in the balloon, that is not in ink. Technically it's ink, but it's not black ink. And the reason for that is so that I can scan this in to my computer, match it up as closely as possible, and then using some levels and various other techniques, I can remove the blue so that all that is left is the black ink line. And this is this is a standard practice in comics in general. It's not the end all be all, you have to do this, but it is a technique that allows people to have a little bit more flexibility when they're building pages out.
Yeah, that goes back, I think, to when they were Xeroxing was only in full-on black and white, because that blue pencil would just disappear. Even without a computer, it would do it. One other thing I just wanted to bring up, because I managed to find it, is that I do, in fact, have one of my minis available.
Oh, goodness.
Yep.
Never skip neck day.
Never skip neck day. My comic is about cosplayers, so that's a wig joke.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But this is the size that I ended up at, because I was told that 8th letter was a little too small. And one of the things that's funny about it, the reason I wanted to do a small collection like this, like I said, it's a comic about cosplayers. I talked to one of my cosplay friends, Trixie, and she said, you probably don't want to be like doing big prints of the strips, which is what I was originally doing. I was actually selling like huge strip prints of like the Yonkoma style strips that I had. And what she said was like, most cosplayers don't have pockets. Like you'd be better off making something very small. So I'm like, ooh, mini collections. And I basically was able to make something that directly catered to the audience I was going for, was convenient for them, had a story to go with it, and at this size is a little bit more legible. I think part of the problem also is I have a font based on my handwriting, so you have to be able to read my chicken scratch. Yep. So interesting question from the chat also. Let me get out of the big face mode. Is best way to space panels?
Artistic interpretation.
Okay, cool. I was curious if anyone had a good answer for this, because I do not.
What I would say is a good best practice. I'd say when you're dealing with just general starting out, getting an idea of things, at least 1/8 of an inch. Like if you're dealing the space between your margins between panels, 1/8 of an inch is a great place to start. But I'd also say feel it out, because there's no science to this. Mm-hmm. So as long as it doesn't feel like panels are getting too close to each other and creating tension, you should be fine. But then, to break that rule, maybe you want to create tension. So creating what's called tangents could be fun. So the idea being, you'll have two panels next to each other. Maybe that panel is ever so close and the corner is touching, but it's not quite touching.
Mm-hmm.
That might be a fun narrative device you can use for your story to create some form of, like I said, tension that benefits what you're trying to get across.
Yes. If we can get back to the grid. There we go.
Yep, there we go.
The other thing too that I would say is that it also depends on the subject matter of your comic and how you would like to approach it. Because from my perspective of making The Legend of Jamie Roberts, I actually do something very deliberate when it comes to panel spaces in the space between panels, which is that in the sequences that take place in a spirit realm called The Way, there are no panel borders. Everything flows very deliberately. The only pages where there are distinct panel edges are in the sequences where the main characters are awake and interfacing with the material world. Because then there's lines and edges that distinguish, like, oh, this is a firm boundary.
I've had problems with figuring out spacing between panels since I started doing comics, because I always had it in my head that you want those panel borders to be as thin as possible. And then in practice, I realized this doesn't work. Like it's a balancing act I'm still trying to figure out. I will say, like, the best thing you can do, and this goes for almost anything in comics, if you think it looks better or worse one way or the other, err on the side of clarity.
Yes, absolutely.
100%.
With comics, the ultimate thing that you want to be is clear.
Yeah. I've tend to find that when I make my panels too thin, it messes up clarity because the borders between panels almost become non-existent. And sometimes you want that, but it should be a very deliberate choice. I also used to make my panel borders, like the actual lines for the panels, too thin. So yeah, it's all going to come down to personal taste and experimentation, but it's definitely something you're going to want to mess with. I also know, I always forget which it is, but I have it built to automatically do it for me in Clip Studio. But by default, a lot of people do, I think, more space on horizontal panel breaks and less space on vertical panel breaks. I might have that backwards, but I've noticed that a lot.
I don't know. I think it depends on the artists, I think.
Yeah. All right. We are coming up on the 1.5 hour mark, and I think we've covered most of what we wanted to cover.
Pretty much.
Anyone have anything in particular they wanted to make sure we hit?
Make sure that if you haven't backed it yet, that you check out the crowdfunder campaign for the C3 Anthology 2023. There's a QR code here. There is a link in the description and on the screen right now. We are doing this live stream because this was a goal that was unlocked when the crowdfunder raised $200. If we raise $400, we're doing another themed live stream. All of that information will also be on the crowdfunder page.
I'm also
link.
Yep, I'm bringing up the information right now because I don't remember exactly what we said the next one was going to be.
One of the streams that we would unlock, and I believe this one's at the 800 mark, is doing a live stream about how to format your comic for webtoons. It was either at the 600 or the 800 mark. I don't remember which, but it's one of the unlockable streams. If we hit that particular funding goal, we can make that stream happen.
Yep, and that's a particularly cool topic to check out since Webtoons is one of the bigger publishers out there for web comics at this point. But yeah, we are looking forward to that. And there are goals we just hit the $200. It's 400 and 600, I think, for the 2 goals.
Okay.
So, yes. Use the
QR code right there,
or the
link on the screen, and also in the doobly-doo, or as some nerds say, the description. I prefer doobly-doo.
Sounds good. By the way, Kelsey, can you tell us where people can find you on the internet?
Well, y'all can find me at kelseydcrawford.com. Everything that I do is there, including links to my own crowdfunder campaign for The Legend of Jamie Roberts Volume 2, which I've mentioned a couple of times already. But all of those links can be found at kelseydcrawford.com. That's KELCID Crawford.com. There should not be an R after the D.
I typed that up real quick because I realized we didn't have it for some reason.
Okay. Yeah.
Hold on.
You're going to need to fix that. There you go. That's better.
There we go.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Best place to find me anywhere.
Throwing it over to James. Where can people find you?
I mean, like my little tag says there, look up Easterly Art on pretty much any social platform. You're going to be looking for that logo. If you see that, you are definitely in the right place. And also check out Comics Wellspring. That's COMIX Wellspring.
Great. A quick thing for that. Is that the website too?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
There you go.
It is.
All right. And you can find my work at bwhcomics.com. I'm also at BWH Comics on Patreon, Instagram, Twitch, and YouTube. You can find my weeb comic, Cospain, weeb comic about cosplay and convention craziness, over at cospainecomic.com. And I will not bother to bring up my name and stuff because I don't want to type right now. I'm done. There's a sign off that we've been doing for all of the C3 streams. We do with your right hand a C, your left hand a 3, pointing at the thing.
Oh, okay.
Yep. All right. C3.
I will not make this inappropriate. I promise.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us, guys. Rock on and never stop drawing.
You are awesome.
Bye.